I want the Seahawks to fix the offensive line, and you want the Seahawks to fix the offensive line. Everybody does. I just don't think you have to spend the 18th overall pick in order to do that. The Seahawks have 10 picks in this draft. For the first time in a long time, they have an experienced coaching staff who know exactly the kind of system they want to run. This isn't like last year when you have an offensive coordinator who's never coached in the NFL before, an offensive line coach who's never coached in the NFL before. They know what they're doing. They know the kind of scheme they want to run, and they know the kind of players they need to make this work. Brock Hewitt was on with Brian Nemhauser on his show this week. He talked about what they're looking for. They want foot speed and get off. Classic outside zone blocking guards. And there are some really good ones in this draft who are going to be available round 2, round 3, day 3 as well of the draft. You do not have to force things with the 18th overall pick. And I know what people will say. Well, look, haven't we done this before? Haven't the Seahawks been in this position before where the cons are, go and get an Oluwatimi in round 5. Go and get an Anthony Bradford in round 4. Go and get a Christian Haynes in round 3. You have to let the draft play out according to your grades. You cannot force things. When you force things, you end up in a situation like 2019 where you trade away Frank Clark and, hey, you'd love for Brian Burns to be there. He gets picked before you select. You'd love Rashawn Gary to be there. He gets picked before you select. What do you do? Oh, we'll just go and get the next defensive end who's on our board. It's LJ Collier. You reach for a need. It doesn't work. You can't operate that way. You have to stick to your board. And when I look at this offensive line in the first round, I think you have players who are, I think Will Campbell's overrated. I think Kelvin Banks is kind of an okay right tackle prospect for the NFL. I really like Gray Zabel and Armand Membu. Membu's not going to be there for you at 18. I like Zabel, but when I was speaking to the people I speak to at this time of year to get their thoughts on the draft, and when I talk about these people, I'm not blowing my own trumpet here. The people that I talk to at this time of year to get their thoughts on the draft class, they know what they're talking about. And one of the people that I spoke to last week told me that Gray Zabel would not be a good use of a first-round pick. And I think there are going to be teams, maybe even quite a few of them, who agree with that sentiment, that think he's a decent player, but he's probably the 45th best player in the draft. And he wouldn't be a good pick to have at number 18. And if the Seahawks view that in the same way, if they have, say, a 6.35 grade on Gray Zabel, and they have other players in this class available to them who are a 6.5 or a 6.45, they have to stick to the board. They can't force the pick and take Gray Zabel. So that was what my sources were saying. I posted a video with Mike Mayock on SeahawksDraftBlog.com today. And Mike Mayock was making the exact same point, that he doesn't think the first-round options on the offensive line are very exciting this year. What he did say, when he was specifically referencing the Seahawks, by the way, was that the interior O-line options in round 2, round 3 are pretty good. And I'm afraid to say it, but that might be the best way for the Seahawks to go, to draft the best player on their board at number 18, and then to go and get those attractive interior O-line options in round 2 and round 3. And is that such a bad thing? Last time I checked, Creed Humphrey was a second rounder, a late second rounder, 63rd overall pick. Quinn Miners, the second highest graded guard in the NFL, according to PFF last year, was a 3rd-round pick. Cam Jurgens and Landon Dickerson for the Eagles, 2 second-round picks. Dominic Pooney last year, everybody liked him. 4th-round pick. You know, there's players littered in the top 10 centers and top 10 guards in the NFL who aren't first-rounders. So the Seahawks don't have to spend number 18 on an offensive lineman. They do have to draft some offensive linemen. They do have to develop those players, and those players have to perform to enable the Seahawks to take steps to improve their offensive line. That is an absolute must-have for the Seahawks in 2025, to have a better offensive line. But the concern that I have is that we're going to get to draft night. We're all going to be really excited when that first round happens. They're going to take a non-offensive lineman, and the internet is going to explode. And they're going to say it's the same old John Schneider, and it's the same old Seahawks. I'm telling you, the way to draft is not to reach for need. And saying, just draft a lineman, just fix the offensive line, is no different than saying, just draft a franchise quarterback. It's really hard to find elite offensive linemen. Most teams in the league have bad offensive lines. Now, I accept Seattle's has been particularly bad. There are some reasons for that, though. The inexperienced staff, the constant chopping and changing of coordinators, the no real plan in terms of scheme and drafting players for the scheme and sort of coherent structure to the offensive line. You know, Anthony Bradford is one right guard on the team, but he looks very different to Christian Haynes. He looks very different to Lamea. You can't operate like that. Really, you should be able to watch an offensive lineman on tape and go, that's a Seahawks offensive lineman. And over the last few years, it's been very hard to do. It's been very easy to sort of identify who the Eagles offensive linemen are. We need to get to a point where you throw on a tape and you go, that guy can fit in Seattle's scheme. And I legitimately think we are getting to that point. But those players in this draft class might not be there at 18. They might be there 50, 52, round 3, round 4, maybe even round 5. And I think that's possibly the way it's going to work out. Because when I look at this draft, they may well take Gray Zabel and everyone will be happy at 18. If they don't, it easily could be Emeka Egbuka. Because he fits the Seahawks, what they look for in terms of physical testing, upside, character, aggressive play on the field, leadership. He was seen as the guy at Ohio State. It could be him. It could be Malachi Starks, who has a lot of that mental makeup, but in the safety position. It could be Donovan Ezeraku, who, again, has fantastic mental makeup, massive production at Boston College. You know, it could be a player who is not an offensive lineman. And I know people aren't going to like it, and they're not going to like me talking in this way, but when I watch the tape, I honestly, I really like Gray Zabel. I don't see a massive difference between what he's doing on tape and what Chase Lunt's doing on tape. Chase Lunt could be available round 3, round 4. It may be that they go and think, okay, we could go and get Zabel at 18, or we could just take Dylan Fairchild in round 3 and plug him in at left guard, and he's got the foot speed and the athleticism we need. He's got the wrestling background. He's explosive. We can plug him in and feel pretty good about that. You know, at the center position, it could be Jared Wilson, whose testing is very similar to Eric McCoy, but he's a late round 2, early round 3 type. It could be Eli Cox in round 4, round 5, who is very athletic, and I like his tape at Kentucky. It could be Charles Grant from William and Mary, who, again, there's not a massive difference between Gray Zabel and Charles Grant on tape. It could be Cameron Williams, who I think is bloody awful at right tackle for Texas, although he was playing with an injury at the end of the year, in fairness. But I think the way that he moves, the way that he hits at the second level, that'll work. You could put him at left guard. Those guys might be better fits for this system than anybody other than Gray Zabel in round 1. So why would you force a need on a bad scheme fit, a player who's not worth it, when you can get better value and better players for your system a little bit later on and go and draft the best player on your board at number 18? And I also think, you know, as I'm reading some of those names out, you know, some of those guys are going to be 3rd, 4th, 5th rounders. It wouldn't even surprise me if Seahawks went best player available at 18, best player available at 50, best player available at 52, and then started looking at the offensive lineman. But you know what will happen? It'll be a massive meltdown. The Seahawks don't care about the offensive line. Trust me. If Steve Hutchinson, if the second coming of Steve Hutchinson was available at number 18, they'd take him. They would take him. This is not a team that has shirked drafting offensive linemen. They have a top 10 pick at left tackle. They have a couple of 3rd rounders who at the moment are projected to start. In the past, they've spent 1st rounders on Jermaine Ifedi, James Carpenter, 2nd round pick on Ethan Posick. They tried to trade up for Cooper Beebe a year ago in round 2. You know, they do want to spend picks on offensive linemen. Of course they do, just as they want to spend picks on quarterbacks. But if those players are not there, you can't just create a situation where supply meets demand. It then doesn't mean, well, the best thing to do is go and spend millions of dollars on very, very average players or even bad players in free agency. It doesn't mean forcing a need at number 18. It means playing the hand that you dealt. And maybe in the past, the Seahawks have played the hand badly by getting the wrong staff, maybe taking too long to move on from Pete Carroll and stuff like that. Whatever you want to pin the blame on, John Schneider's decision making in the draft and free agency, yep, you can talk about that as well, without a doubt. But right now, they've got the staff to help improve the situation. They have 10 picks in a draft, which has got good zone blocking linemen available. I just think you've got to give them a chance. You've got to give them a chance to get the players in to come in and improve this offensive line. I believe they can do it. I believe they can add some really good players at other positions in this draft as well. And they can have a good team molded in the vision of the new head coach, Mike Macdonald, moving forward. Just my plea to everybody is don't overreact if they don't take an offensive lineman at 18. Because I think it's probably more likely than not, it's a different position that they're going to take in that area. And we should be ready for that. We should be prepared for that. But it will not mean that the Seahawks can't improve their offensive line.